And the question is that the words proposed to be omitted stand as part of the question, and I give the call to the member for Warringah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the extension of JobKeeper wage subsidy scheme, and I know that for many businesses, especially in Warringah, they are still suffering from the impact of the restrictions and the downturn in the economic activity, and this was extremely welcome announcements. The bill we are discussing today will be a lifeline for many businesses and their employees over the months to come from October to March. I've been meeting with many businesses around the electorate, as well as with the Manly and the Warringah Chambers of Commerce, to hear their concerns. Warringah has over 17,000 small businesses and sole traders. There are some businesses who, even with this extended lifeline, will struggle to survive, and I urge the government to consider targeted interventions to support those faced with near complete shutdown, such as travel agents and those in the events, arts and entertainment sectors. The JobKeeper amendments extend the income subsidy from the end of September this year through to the March next year. It's very much welcome the change in flexibility in relation to the two tiers of payment under the new scheme, one tier for full-time workers and one for those working less than 20 hours per week. This is a good development to better tailor the response to the need. There's no doubt that small businesses are hurting, and I've heard from many employers in my electorate that they are struggling with the disruption to their business and need all the flexibility that they can get to remain viable. These businesses range from physiotherapists to brewers. They're shifting their business models, they're innovating, they're adapting, and they need their staff to come along with them. The introduction of the category of legacy businesses, those that were formerly qualified for JobKeeper, but who have now recovered sufficiently not to require the financial assistance, is a significant development. But there is some concern in relation to the ability to keep the Fair Work flexibility provisions, in that may lead to reduction of work and income for employees, which would have a significant impact. So I do urge the government to consider inserting minimum wage impact provisions in addition to the cap on the number of hours that can be reduced. This bill is important to prevent the much-touted economic cliff that is arriving in September. In Warringah alone, there are over 7,500 businesses on the current version of JobKeeper. It's been a lifeline for these businesses, and I'm pleased to see it continue. But there are certain issues that have been highlighted by my constituents and advocates, such as clarifications regarding the eligibility of startups and sole traders, future eligibility of early education workers for JobKeeper, the need to consider the role of women and youth in our economic stimulus packages, and the need to develop industry-specific packages for those hit most severely by the restrictions imposed on business operations. I have had many sole traders approach me because they were initially deemed eligible for JobKeeper, received assistance for a couple of months and then had it pulled away again. The changes have caused significant concerns for those, and I would urge the government to clarify the requirements. I was contacted by Andrea, a sole trader, and she's not alone. An estimated 9,000 new businesses in the same situation. The head of 9 accounting bodies, including the CPA Australia and Chartered Accountants Australia, issued a warning to the government in June, and in relation to clarity, in relation to the GST integrity rule for new businesses. I don't believe there's been a response. In my electorate, there are many who share concerns about support for startups. These are businesses that we will be relying on, and we need people to create more opportunities. These are businesses like Johan Eckstein, who runs a clothing and branding business in Brookvale, or Andrew Gillespie, who has had to escalate his case to the AAT, or Yvonne Bowyer, who fell through the cracks of both JobKeeper and JobSeeker. So I do urge the government to clarify the provisions. We need to support start-up businesses, risk takers, innovators. We need their businesses to survive and prosper to the other side. Of course, childcare requires clarification. Early childhood educators were the only or the first group to be taken off JobKeeper. Now, the government announced the end of JobKeeper for childcare workers when they also announced the other support package for the industry to offset the loss of JobKeeper. But we've now seen no new announcements from the government regarding what support will be available to this industry post-September. The Parenthood Group have been calling for childcare centres to return to eligibility for JobKeeper, and I support that call, especially as a majority of people working in those industries are women, and they are the hardest hit in terms of job losses. The childcare sector is vital as well for supporting women to return and transition back into the workforce. We can't afford to let that sector collapse. And I would note that the government needs to have a specific focus on their support for Australian women to recover their employment opportunities. To date, a number of packages have been very much focused on male-dominated industries, and we haven't seen the same attention to women's industries. Especially when it comes to the early education sector, as I've mentioned, casual employment, tertiary education, and arts and entertainment. All these sectors have higher levels of female employment. They have a higher impact of COVID and backdowns, and they've got the lower levels of eligibility for JobKeeper. So I urge the government to take this on notice and do something about it. Similarly, our young people have taken the brunt of this pandemic. Youth unemployment in Warringah is at 13%, more than 3 times higher than the overall unemployment rate. Although they've been impacted the least by the disease itself, youth have been hit the hardest by the economic consequences now, and there's no doubt they will bear the brunt of the recovery. I urge the government to consider new approaches to support this generation now and into their uncertain future. We know that in times of recession, it is often the youth that invariably hardest hit, the last to recover, and the least considered in recovery packages. I must also mention that we need some industry-specific packages, especially when it comes to the travel industry. They've been devastated by border closures, both international and domestic borders. We've had a lot of attention on airlines, but travel agents have received less attention from the media, but their situation is arguably more acute. They're continuing to work to secure refunds for their customers, but that doesn't bring them any income. I've met with many travel agents, including the CEO of the Australian Federation of Travel Agents, and they really need a sector-specific recovery package because they were the first to be shut down and they undoubtedly will be the last to reopen. Our events industry has been decimated by restrictions. I've heard from several events and event support companies in Warringah who, despite JobKeeper, will struggle to stay afloat. Companies like Great Big Events is a local company that specialises in high-profile international events. Their business is gone. Companies like Nick from Exhibit Systems, who's been operating in Warringah for over 20 years. He has zero income since the 13th of March this year and employs 46 staff. He has very tough decisions ahead. Of course, the offer of the 50% business loans that the government and the government guarantee is not of much assistance when the bank cannot approve any loans because there's simply no business plan in the future with their industry completely shut down. So there clearly needs to be some certainty. Countries like the UK and Germany are addressing these industries with specific strategies, and I'd urge the government to look at implementing some of those. The arts sector is precluded from, many within the arts have been found to not be eligible for JobKeeper and not be able to have assistance of JobSeeker. So this has been an area where I would urge the government to do more. There are thousands of those who work in the arts and entertainment industry are suffering. Musicians, dancers, artists, comedians, cameramen and women, sound engineers, roadies, editors, producers, event staff at theatres. The ripple effect is endless. And my electoral office has been inundated with stories of people that are really struggling. So I welcome the continuation of JobKeeper and the consultative approach to the refinements of the Fair Work Act provisions. I urge the government to consider further measures to address issues like rent reliefs and issues like the Code of Conduct. I encourage the government to develop tailored packages for industries most affected by the restrictions on operations. The government must consider approaches to supporting industries while they get back up and running. Now, on top of having a vaccine, we must develop a sustainable way of operating in a COVID-safe way in the future. For industries like travel, for events, for entertainment, and many in the arts, this is more than a recession. This is a near 100% shutdown of their business. So we must find plans. Thank you.